Hey guys, Sleepy Reader here. Just want to share with you some thoughts on the comic books I've read recently, which includes a lot of DC. Still loving the gatefold covers. I picked up Constantine, even though I didn't get Constantine #1. And I was thinking I would just let Constantine slide over me. You know, I've heard lots of great things about the Vertigo Constantine. I think I've only read a few random issues many, many years ago. Mostly just know Constantine as a character in the old Alan Moore Swamp Thing, and now in the Justice League Dark. But I really like this cover a lot, and it's there's a bit of controversy. You know, people saying Constantine sucks, other people saying they kind of like it. I kind of went off about it a little bit on the Comic Talk podcast. Anyway, I wasn't expecting to like it a whole lot. And I hated the previews for #1, which is why I didn't get #1. Didn't like the art. But the art actually made a pretty good impression on me here by Renato Guedes. And he has the colorist Marcelo Mialo, who I've liked a lot on his work on iVampire and elsewhere. And the color is very nice, if a bit kind of smoky looking. And arguably that's the right approach for Constantine. It all has a bit, the art-wise, a bit too ethereal, a lot of thin lines, and then the color is kind of ghostly a bit. And to me, that's not totally ideal, but I'd prefer it if it were more sort of shadowy rather than wispy, if you know what I mean. But actually, it's pretty decent art. Love the art on the cover. That's a different artist. That's Juan Jose Ripe, one of my favorites. But it's a story of... You can read this one issue and enjoy it. It does connect back somewhat to the first issue, and there'll certainly be more in later issues. But it feels fairly complete in its own. A story of sort of wizards and magical people. It addresses a little bit the corruption of the soul that dealing with magic does to you, and the buzz you get out of it, and how that buzz can control you. So the magical users are like drug addicts in a sense. So I thought this was pretty good. Not thinking about what Constantine should be, what Hellblazer used to be, just reading it without much expectations. I enjoyed it. It doesn't seem like the same Hellblazer as in Justice League Dark, but I think this is a more interesting Hellblazer than we see in the Justice League Dark. That one is just kind of a smart aleck. One thing that bothers me about Constantine in general is just the sense that he has all these magical tricks up his sleeve, but he doesn't... I mean, I guess it's kind of clever that he doesn't use them too often, and he never acts like he's a magician. But it also feels like he could do anything. I don't know what his limits are or anything like that. And that's a problem with a lot of magic comic books, magic superheroes, is a lack of definition. Shoot a magic spell out. What does that do? What does that mean? What does that cost? But those kind of thoughts aside, this is a solid issue. I also picked up Dial H, which I believe I dropped at either issue 6 or 7. And I'd heard, particularly from Harry Monster, but also from other people, that it had gotten a lot better. And they were right. This was a very good issue. Love that cover. That's probably my favorite of the fold-out covers, I think. And the interior art's very good. It's not as... pardon the pun, flashy as Alberto Ponticelli's work was in I, Frankenstein. This is lower key compared to that, and he doesn't get to show off his powerful, imaginative art as much. But it's kind of a satisfying art with very good storytelling, and it might be that part of that he may be part of why this book has gotten better. This clearer storytelling. I thought the old artist, who's sorry, I can't remember his name at the moment, was actually quite a decent artist. but it might be that it might be that China Mieville has become a better comic book storyteller, and it may also be that he's teamed up with an artist who does a better job of storytelling. So this felt pretty dense. It felt like a lot happened. I did go back and pick up the issue before it, but I haven't had a chance to read it because I liked it so much I went back. But I was able to kind of pick up on what was going on and enjoy the story for what it was, even though I wasn't 100% sure about like this villain, the Centipede's motivations and what's going on there. He was still an interesting villain, and it tied back to the Zero issue, which I have read, where we learned that apparently the Dial steals power from superheroes in other universes. But in this case, they appear to have stolen power from the Flash, a hero from their own universe. And it's interesting, although it kind of gets in the way of the Vertigo-ish quality of this book, it'll also be interesting to see, if done right, their interaction with the rest of the DC universe. So it was a very pleasurable read. So I'm back on Dial H. I hope it doesn't get canceled. I saw one article, I believe, in Bleeding Cool a while ago saying they think it will be canceled because they saw in a catalog that the next trade will have like 10 issues. And that means to them it's just wrapping it up, putting all 10 issues in one trade to get all the issues in. But hopefully that information may be tentative, and maybe people will notice Dial H has gotten better and more people will get on it. So yeah, 2 books right there that I wasn't expecting to be good and were very good. Saga was a decent issue. It was kind of a change of pace. A large portion of the story was a conversation between the robot prince and the author of the romance novel that inspired our 2 protagonists to come together as a couple. But I thought it was handled really well and was really interesting. And lots of smaller twists and turns, but they still felt like twists and turns to me. So I've heard some people say this was a lesser issue, and I see exactly what they mean, but I still liked it a lot, especially in the context of the larger story that we've been reading. There was the controversy about people thinking Apple wasn't allowing Saga on, and it turned out to be Comixology just assuming that Apple wouldn't let them put this through. They probably have, someone at Comixology that quickly screens all the comics looking for pornographic images because they know that Apple's strict about that. And I won't show them here, but they were very small, but definitely very pornographic images. And I'm guessing if you're looking at, if the person, the person who was kind of filtering comics just sort of popped on to that screen with the way the Apple app works, the way the Comixology works, where the panels blow up, or you scan on a splash page, you scan sometimes different parts of the splash page. Those small pornographic images might have become fairly big on the screen of an iPad or on a computer. So that's probably where that problem came. I don't think it was a case of homophobia, although at least one of the images is a gay image. I do think, in this issue, and then there was the issue where they went to Sextillion, showed very graphic scenes that could have been done considerably less graphically and had pretty much the same impact. It's probably just a matter of your aesthetic opinions. I think it could be toned down a little bit. It feels like in these 2 issues that I'm talking about, that there's an aesthetic that comes from internet porn. And you may get, if you look at internet porn, you may start thinking that it's just normal for those to be the sexual images. But in my own taste would be for you can do a much more toned down than the sort of extremely graphic kind of ways that a lot of internet porn has gone in. Maybe but you could also argue that it's necessary to do those extreme images for Saga to make the exact point that they want to make. So anyway, a good issue, kind of a tempest in a teapot about the images in here. If you're a young person and you think you're missing something titillating, no, it's not titillating. You're not. It's just very minor. So this remains a good but very adult book. And I don't think it would be that interesting to younger people, because I think it does. A lot of these issues it touches on almost seem to be issues that you're going to appreciate more in your late 20s and onward than you will when you're younger, because I think Brian K. Vaughan is starting from a kind of middle-aged perspective in a way, even though his characters aren't that middle-aged here. Then we've got Batman 19, also in the Gatefold WTF series. Really cool cover. Looks a little different than your average Greg Capullo cover, maybe because of the deep shadows and the close-ups on the faces at the same time. And the art is a little different. And I don't know... My microphone just fell down onto my chest. I don't know if it's because some of these scenes take place in broad daylight, and I'm not used to seeing that in Batman. But they are... There's kind of a brighter... There's more space in the panels and stuff. So I think for the mood of this issue, it goes back to more of what we're used to on pages like this. But it is interesting to see Capullo take a slightly different approach. Also, there's a different inker. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes. It makes a subtly different difference. The story had me a little off balance, and it's a two-part story, I believe, before they start year zero. I won't say who the villain is, although a lot of people have already said but it's kind of a mystery who the villain is for most of the book. But there's stuff in here, even once I learned who the villain is and what might have really been going on at the beginning of the story, that the dialogue just seemed weird and off, and I almost thought I was reading a dream sequence. But then I realized by the end of the book that this part that seemed off to me wasn't a dream sequence. But it wasn't what it seemed to be. But still, like the dialogue from the police and like Commissioner Gordon, it seemed a little strange to me. It also seems like, someone is nearly killed or severely killed in a way that he must not be dead, but it looks like to me he would be, disabled for life after the scene in here. But I don't think that's the direction it's going in. So this was, it was a good read. It didn't wow me as much as one has come to expect from Batman. It's kind of weird how much expectations influence reading. So it may or may not have been better than Dial H for Hero and Constantine, but I enjoyed Dial H for Hero and Constantine a bit more, whereas I was a bit thrown off here. There's also a backup story that's written by James Tynion, who is the kind of understudy of Scott Snyder, his student from a college English class, who he's brought on and co-written with, and I think this is the first thing I've seen that was completely a solo story by Tynion. I don't think Snyder even helped in the plotting of this. It's helped a lot by the moody, shadowy art of Alex Maleev. And and it's a two-parter, so we have the first few pages of it, and it's not bad writing, but it doesn't feel like anything special or interesting to me. So I enjoyed it for the art, but the story might reveal something more later on, and maybe I've just come to expect in every issue of Batman some interesting revelations and angles on the characters and stuff, and it was just a kind of plain vanilla story where Batman and Superman are dealing with a slightly unusual crime scene. And now I'm going back a few weeks in time. I picked up Superman number 18, so this is before, there's no gatefold cover, because I saw somewhere that it features Orion, one of my favorite characters in the DC universe, created by Jack Kirby. So I was very curious and went to pick it up. It's written by Scott Lobdell, who I avoid. I tend to think of him as someone who almost purposefully writes mediocre comics. I don't know why I have that idea fixed in my head, but just sort of a hack. And I might be wrong. This issue had 3 different artists, and it felt very different with the different artists. The artist who did the opening scene with Orion was very good, and I found it very exciting. And then the tone changed pretty fast when we had kind of Superman dealing with politics. Overall, I found the story okay. It was sort of scene, kind of moving the story along, the various stories that obviously have been going on in Superman. And bits of them were interesting, but it didn't form into a super appealing whole or anything. And most of it, other than the Orion aspect of it, it didn't really captivate my interest or anything. But it looks like there's going to be more Orion and the New Gods in Superman, so I'll probably be picking it up. We even got, I believe, an appearance of the High Father, and maybe we just saw him talking to the High Father, or just barely saw the High Father there. Anyway, it's not a horrible comic book or anything. It's a little bit plotting. A little bit better was this issue of Supergirl, although it took me a while to get used to the art. And in fact, I felt like the artist, it was all one artist, but I felt like the artist was uneven here. That opening picture of Lex Luthor didn't strike my fancy much. In fact, it was kind of visually confusing. Like, I guess he's got tattoos on his face or something. But a few pages later, the art got a lot better. This artist is, well, on the cover it says Muhammad Asar, who's been doing it before, but it's actually Robson Roca, and I believe I've seen his art elsewhere, but I can't really recall where. But the art gets quite cool as you go along, and there's even though I read the last issue, which was from Hell on Earth, there's lots of elements here I don't understand that must go back to before the Hell on Earth storyline. But I enjoyed it. I think I'm going to keep on getting Supergirl. There's interesting stuff going on. I don't know who this kind of lava character is that was fighting her, but that seemed like an interesting antagonist. And we also have the appearance of, I can't remember the character's name, but the woman who is Power Girl, who is actually Supergirl from another universe, shows up, and she seems to be having problems when Supergirl's having problems. So there's some connection between them, and that might prove to be interesting. Another book I had a lot of fun with, which is also a week or two old, is The Indestructible Hulk, drawn by Walt Simonson. It makes me want Walt Simonson. I want him so bad to stay on this book. Him and Mark Waid together seem like a perfect team, bringing the best of the old and the new together. Simonson's artwork is not appealing. It's more appealing on the kind of layout, dynamics, impact kind of end. I heard one person say it was awful. And maybe if you're not expecting it, it might seem that way. But to me, it just seems like really great art, really great storytelling and layouts and dynamics. But in terms of the way most current comic book artists do a very detailed, very sort of beautifully sculpted figures, he may seem kind of sloppy compared to that. But to me, it's well worth the just stronger storytelling. It's like Mark Waid's a whole new writer when he's working with Walt Simonson. I wonder if they worked in the Marvel way, plot first, or whether they worked whole script. Because so there might be a lot of, especially if they worked in the Marvel way, a lot of more contribution from Simonson in the storytelling. And this features, they've traveled through time and maybe to another dimension or something, not just to one of Thor's realms, because we get a retro Thor. And this is the Marvel Thor, ironically, that compared to the current Thor done by Jason Aaron, that feels like a Thor just from a completely different fantasy story about Thor. So it was fun to see that more familiar Thor, personality-wise, in action, fighting frost giants. It definitely, took me back both to the Walt Simonson days and to the old-fashioned Marvel, Kirby, Lee, John Buscema, Roy Thomas kind of days. And we get kind of a surprise at the end with the Hulk. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. And I think in the 6 issues that Mark Waid's done, this is the first issue in which the Hulk says a few words. So I'm hoping in upcoming issues we learn more of the Hulk sides of the story as Mark Waid sees it. Anyway, great fun. Less fun for me was Captain America number 5. Had some kind of cool fight scenes. To me, the story only progressed slightly as Zemo and his daughter finally discover that Captain America has been raising Zemo's son, her brother. Captain America continues to me to feel kind of pitiful and not a very successful hero. There is a kind of exciting scene at the end where he finally takes action with the thing that's bothering him in his chest. So my general feeling is, although on one hand I feel like they rushed Captain America into this other dimension and aged him forward, 15 years or something over the course of the comic. But on the other hand, the comic feels kind of drawn out with very little happening in each issue. So it's an okay read. If I didn't have a subscription to it, I'd probably drop it. Last but not least, I was given a digital copy of Thanos Rising number 1 by my good friend Brandon, and I really liked it. I thought it was very good, and I was not expecting to like it just because I didn't see a point in Thanos' origin, and it's kind of like getting Darth Vader's origin. It sort of weakened it. Or I worried it would weaken it, I'm sorry. And I'm not a big fan of Simon Bisley's art. It's to me, it's the kind of art that looks, it's kind of ugly to me, but it also looks kind of cool. But I don't think of him as a great storyteller, but it seemed to work. And Jason Aaron has worked out an interesting story here so far. For the development of Thanos. I'm very interested to see where he'll go with the next issue. So I'm very glad that I'm getting to read it digitally now rather than having to wait for a trade, which was what I probably would have done if it got good reviews from other people. It's still, even though I'm enjoying it, it's hard to see how we're going to take this fairly decent kid from here to there. Even can see turning him into a villain, but turning him into one of the most evil guys in the universe. How are you going to do that? That seems daunting. But it'll be fun to see how Jason Aaron manages it. And I'm starting to weaken on my dislike of Bisley's art, and maybe I'll start to enjoy it. I think in part it's part of what I often don't like is his color palette, which seems kind of sickly and vomity to me. It seems like the colors of vomit. Anyhow, I mostly enjoyed the art, and I really loved the story, so that was really good. So I've had a lot of good reading experiences. I mean, there was nothing that was bad. The Superman was kind of half and half. Captain America was kind of okay, and the rest was good. Batman was a little bit of a head scratcher, just in portions of it. I still have Sex to read. I started reading the beginning of it and wasn't very excited. But maybe I will get, and I don't mean sexually excited. I just didn't feel like keep reading. But I do like the art and the color. But I hate the lettering and the story just, it seems like it should be moving more. And I also have Secret Service to read, and now I'm going to read the previous issue of Dial H, and I finally got a hold of Deadpool Killustrated. It was really weird that my store didn't have this. I mean, I can understand when they sometimes run out of other things. But anyway, talk to y'all later, and I'll watch all your videos.